Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam and this is a Royal Star Magnolia. This is a Royal Star Magnolia that gets the beautiful white flowers in the early spring. This is a deciduous magnolia. There are evergreen magnolias that grow in the south where I am from zone 7 and up. And then you have these deciduous magnolias that cover quite a bit more territory. And this one's called Royal Star. So do you call a plant that gets over 20 feet tall a shrub or a tree? The actual technical definition of a shrub is just a multi-trunked plant, and this is definitely a multi-trunk plant. So it's just a very large shrub that gets tree size. These can end up reaching 20 to 25 feet in height, probably 15 or 20 feet in width. Very easy to control this plant, much smaller than that. This is a plant that you can just do a reset on if you need to. Like most deciduous magnolias, Royal Star is extremely cold hardy. This thing can grow all the way up to zone 4, and then it's also very heat tolerant. It can grow all the way down to zone 9. These deciduous magnolias are kind of slow growing to start with. The first year or two you have it in the ground, it may not put on a whole lot of growth. Once it anchors itself in and gets some roots under it, these things can really take off and grow as much as 2 feet in a single season. Magnolias pretty much across the board are sun-loving plants. You want to give this at least 6 hours of sunlight. It might actually grow okay in some filtered light or shady conditions, but I don't think you'd get very many flowers on it. I'm going to be planting this magnolia over here in just some open space. It's a little close to a cherry tree, but it's going to be getting plenty of sun and plenty of space to allow it to become pretty big. That's what I would recommend with this tree. It makes a terrible container plant. I can tell you right now, just from experience growing these, this entire container will be full of roots. Not only do they fill the container with roots, they root out of the bottom and then root into the ground. Growing these is a pain. You have to rotate them occasionally to keep them from anchoring themselves to whatever you're growing them on. It's a very aggressive plant in that way, so I'm just going to put it out here, give it some space to grow. I've seen people using these on the corners of their foundations before. It's a plant that roots aggressively enough that I wouldn't do that. I've seen it before. I don't know how aggressive the roots could be against a foundation, but just based on what I've seen in a container, it's probably not a plant that I'm going to put very, very close to something like a concrete pad or a foundation of my house. Just put it in some open space where it's going to get some sunlight and let it go. So what makes a Royal Star Magnolia better than a Star Magnolia or some of the other deciduous magnolias is it blooms later. These things can sometimes bloom so early in the season that they actually end up getting major freeze or frost damage. So Royal Star will sit there another week or two before it starts blooming, giving it a much better opportunity to get all the flowers open on it without any damage on it. So that's really nice. It has that beautiful double white flower, just gets covered in them. These are the flower buds on them right here. And when I talk about pruning them, you definitely don't want to be pruning on this thing in the winter. You want to definitely always prune it after it flowers. That's kind of key on that because the flower buds are set by late summer. And you can see every tip on this plant right here has the opportunity to get a flower, and then all along these stems, it'll be absolutely covered when it comes out in the spring. The foliage is okay. It's about a 3 to 4 inch long leaf. Obviously, most of them have fallen off here. Since the foliage isn't that spectacular, this is always a plant that I put kind of in the background of everything else. I definitely want a full-on shot of it when it's flowering, in the late winter, because it's one of those first breaths of spring, that spring is coming. That's why I love these so much. But it doesn't have the best foliage in the world or the best structure in the world. So, like I say, the background is the best place for this thing, and then let it put on its show in the late winter and then kind of fade back into the background. I've included videos in the description of this video for planting woody trees and shrubs. This is a plant that I'm really just not concerned about at all. The area that I'm planting it in has really nice loamy soil because I've been mulching that area for years. It's also an area where leaves have blown to for years. So it's just really kind of nice soil where I'm putting it. I'm not even going to bother amending it. If you had clay, you can use some pine bark soil conditioner. If you had really, really sandy soils that drained almost too well, you could mix in some peat moss or something like that. But again, I'm just not that worried about it. I will leave it above the grade just a little bit and not cover anything that's not covered when I plant it. When I pull this thing out of the container, like I said, it's definitely going to be very root bound. I'm going to get after it pretty aggressively with the shovel to get those roots going outward. And after I get the magnolia planted, I'll water it in really, really well. Just saturate the ground all around it. and then I want to let it become dry, or at least slightly dry, before I water it again. I'm planting it in December. In my area, North Carolina, we get pretty regular rainfall in the wintertime. I don't really think I'll have to readdress it at all this winter, maybe once. Next year, in the first year that's been in the ground, I might keep a close eye on it. If it was dry in spring after it had flowered and woken up and started putting on some new growth, I might drag a water hose over to it. But once this thing's rooted in the ground, if you're in an area that gets regular rainfall, you're not gonna really have to do a lot of ongoing watering on it once it's established. It's very drought tolerant. Like I said, I'm planting in late fall or early winter here. I'm not gonna do any fertilizing on it at that time. I don't wanna push any growth whatsoever on it. But as it starts to wake up in the spring after it flowers, I will use a small amount of slow release fertilizer, whatever outdoor slow release fertilizer that lasts 3 to 4 months. The best time to prune one of these deciduous magnolias is after it flowers in the early spring. And you can get after this thing really aggressively. If you need to do a reset with this plant, you can, and I've done that many times in containers with these. You can cut them down to a foot tall, 18 inches tall, something like that, from a big tree down to almost nothing, and get it just to regrow. It's a little scary doing that sometimes, but this is a plant that you can do that with. If it just gets completely out of control, or maybe it leans over or does something weird or is growing in one direction, like I say, you can go in and cut the thing in half anytime, or even lower if you wanted to. If you're trying to keep it a certain size, like I said, this thing can put quite a bit of growth on in a single season once it's established. So you probably want to cut it about 2 feet below where you want to keep it, because that's about how much growth it can put back on that season. There are quite a few chewing pests like aphids and thrips and other things that do get on these deciduous magnolias. I don't often see it really. The bigger issues I actually see is these can get some foliar spotting on them, and they can get some powdery mildew. Really, one of the keys to these, I think, is to get them to dry out in the morning. I'm going to have mine on the east side of my yard, so it's going to get quite a bit of morning sun right off the bat. And I think getting those leaves dried out pretty quickly, it's going to be in enough open space that the wind will move across it. I think all that'll combine to keep any of those kind of leaf spot issues from being too much of a problem. This is a plant, though, if you see that spotting on the leaf, and this one did have some during the season, when those leaves drop off, this is probably leaves that you want to clean up from around the base of it. Otherwise, they'll just hop right back up on there the next spring. It probably will anyway. That might prevent it from just running absolutely out of control, though. Deer have never messed with the deciduous magnolia that I've been aware of since I've been around them. I just don't think deer have any interest in these whatsoever. So what are you waiting for? I'm confident that you can grow the beautiful white spring flowering deciduous Royal Star Magnolia. Thank you for watching my video, and if it was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos.